Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. My name, as I mentioned before, is Dante. I'm from the Swiss Pavilion, more specifically from an organization called SwissNex, which helps to promote Swiss education, research, innovation abroad and connect them with local equivalents. And today, oh my, we have a treat for you because we're very lucky to have two astronauts who will share more information about what they achieved in space. We have the chance of having Mrs. Naoko Yamasaki, former JAXA astronaut and one of the ambassadors of the Japanese pavilion here. We're also very lucky to have Professor Claude Nicolier from Switzerland, from professor at the EPFL, and also a former Swiss astronaut who's going to be sharing more information about what he achieved through space. So, without further ado, I would like to start this session by inviting Ms. Yamakasi to join us and present a bit more about your experience out of space. Ms. Yamasaki, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Naoko Yamazaki from Japan. And thank you for the kind introduction, Dante. And first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to Swiss Pavilion to host this event, and Claude for his friendship. Today, I'd like to share my experience in space, and can I click here? Hopefully it starts. Okay, here we go. So this is International Space Station, as you can see. And I spent 15 days on board the ISS in 2010. Actually, this is my first time in Dubai, but I visited Abu Dhabi before this trip. I attended at World Space Congress, and also I had a lecture in the University, so it was my great honor to visit UAE a couple of times. And probably as you know already, Japan launched UAE's Khalifa-Sat back in 2018. It is an Emirati first developed satellite. And UAE's first Mars probe, Al-Amal, which means hope, in 2020 from Tanegashima in Japan. So I'm very pleased to see those collaboration between space programs in between countries. And this is in the UAE. Can you see the beautiful lights? And Dubai International Airport from space. Well, so this is the picture of the group picture on board the ISS. We have 13 crew members for total, and 7 were launched in a space shuttle, and 6 were an expedition crew member who stayed 6 months on board the ISS. So we made a very unique circle in space because thanks to microgravity. And depending on your posture, you can make any, posture. So depending on your posture, there up and down, it's different from people to people. So up and down doesn't mean anything. There is no absolute up and down in space. So when we make conversations in space, we have to say, hey, look up, you're up. Hey, look up, look down, you're down, and so on. So let's consider the other person's position. Otherwise, we cannot make sense of each other. And here is another group picture of 4 women at the same time. It was a record in history, and I was so pleased to be a part of it. And I'm looking forward to see more and more boys and girls in space. And as a mission specialist, I operated robotics arm to install the Leonardo Italian-made logistics module. And the robotics arm was made in Canada. And American colleague Stephanie Wilson and Japanese I operated the robotic arm to install Leonardo. And after the installation, the American crew members and Russian crew members all together installed scientific equipment into a specific area on the ISS. So I appreciated those kind of flavor of the international collaboration. And this is one of the scientific rack, which contains, lots of experiments. And its weighs almost 1 ton, like a small car, but thanks to the microgravity, it is weightless, so it's easy to carry. However, if it moves at a high speed, it is very difficult to stop it because there is still a mass. It doesn't disappear. So you have to be careful. And at the free time, I brought some Japanese small koto, which is a guitar with 13 strings. And my colleague Soichi Noguchi, another Japanese astronaut, brought a Japanese flute made of wood. And we played together on the weekend. It was a fun moment. And when we are talking about the teamwork, it's not only among the crewmates, but also it includes the flight controllers on the ground and engineers and researchers and sometimes lawmakers or economists. So the space programs are consisted in various people, actually. And the teamwork includes the society as well. And space has a lot of relations with our daily lives. For example, we recycle water on the ISS, and those kind of recycling technology will be helpful on the ground as well. And we are working on the space agriculture on the ISS because right now there are more than 300 menu of space food. It is delicious, but we have to deliver from the ground each time, and it's not sufficient. So we have to be more sufficient, doing agriculture in space. So we are working on it. And currently we grow lettuce and some other vegetables. And, adjusting the LED light to emphasize more red and blue, which are used for the photosynthesis on the leaves. Because the leaves don't use the green light for the photosynthesis, so it reflects the green. So that's why the leaves look green, because it doesn't use for the photosynthesis. So in space, we put red and blue lights to grow faster. And actually, the lettuce grows 3 times faster than on the ground. So those kind of technology will be used in the ground as well. And the Earth, beautiful, isn't it? It is blue marble. But if we collect all the water from the glaciers, oceans, and rivers, it will be like this amount, very small. Can you see this small blue globe? And most of the water are salty water from the ocean. And the pure water, which can be used for our daily lives, agriculture and industries, is only 3% of this blue. So we found this amount from the remote sensing of the satellites as well. So by seeing this, I thought the space, the Earth itself is a spaceship. And we have to, appreciate all the resources on the Earth as well. And this is my favorite moment in space, the sunrise. The upper half is the Earth. It is still dark. And you can see the horizon in a very thin atmosphere in rainbow colors, reflecting the sunrise. It's so beautiful, breathtaking, but at the same time, I was surprised to see how thin the layer of the atmosphere is. If you look up the sky seems to continue to everywhere. However, it's not. It's just this thin, skin-thin layer, and it protects all the lives on the Earth, so you have to protect it. And during the daytime, I was surprised to see the power of the nature. But at night, now, I'm surprised to see the power of human beings, civilizations. And if we put our, forces together, then we can achieve a bigger goals. And here's a famous picture of the Earthlights. Back in Apollo era, this Earthlights picture inspired many people in the world. And Now I am a member of the council of the Arthur Prize, which was initiated by Duke of Cambridge, Prince William. And Prince William got inspiration from the Apollo moonshot. It was declared by the John F. Kennedy, at the time president, and he, put a very ambitious goal to send a human onto the moon within a decade. And 1961, it was just 1 month after Yuri Gagarin made a spaceflight, and it was so ambitious to send a human to the moon, but it became possible. So putting a higher goals and then unite all the resources and wisdom all together, then we can achieve a bigger target. So that's the aim of the Arthur Prize, to repair air, nature, and ocean, and waste-free world, and climate change. So recently, we announced the first ever winners of the Arthur Prize, and it would include individual 15-year-old Indian lady through a private company or group and a government. So each layer has a very important role to protect our Earth. And it is you, each of you, to protect this Earth as well. So, there is so many unknown in the universe, right? There is so many stars, and what we discovered so far is a very tiny space in the universe. So full of wonder means wonderful. So let's discover unknowns in the ocean, and let's make a better future together. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'd like to encourage each of you to be more interested in space, because knowing about space leads you to understand better about our home planet and leads you to understand better of yourself, because knowing about space tells you where we are from and where we should go. So thank you very much.
Ms. Yamasaki, thank you very much for this intervention. Right now, I would like to call on the floor our very own Mr. Professor Claude Nicolier from Switzerland, Switzerland's first astronaut, a national treasure. And we would like to invite you to explain to us a bit more about your experience in space and share with us more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante, for your introduction, and thank you very much, Narco, for a wonderful presentation, a very touching presentation. And I think these events, in a way, is the expression of the friendship between Switzerland and Japan and the UAE. And I would say joining all the nations that are represented here at the Expo. It's really putting people together, and of course with the spirit of space here in particular. I had the privilege of going to space. Being an astronaut is incredible privilege. It's work, no doubt about that, but it's a lot of luck, and it's a privilege. And I had an experience in space with 4 space missions on the space shuttle, which has commonality with what Naoko experienced, in the sense that it was the space shuttle. But the nature of my missions were different, and in particular I had 2 missions to do repair work on the Hubble Space Telescope, and this picture was taken on my last flight in 1999, when I had a spacewalk of a little more than 8 hours to do repair work on the Hubble Space Telescope. I had been an astrophysicist before. I had become an astronaut. The dream mission was really to go to Hubble and do repair work, and I had this huge luck of being able to go twice to Hubble. We spent about 8 hours outside to change the main computer of the telescope and the one fine guidance sensor. And you see on both sides of the visor of my helmet, you have these floodlights. And 8 hours means we went 5 times around the Earth, so it was day, night, day, night, day, nights. And during the nights, orbital nights, when we were in the cone of shadow of the Earth, we continued working. We didn't sleep. And we had to illuminate the place of work with these floodlights. And we always had a warning 1 minute before sunsets, because it's day, and then in 20 seconds becomes night. And you don't want to be in front of a black hole suddenly, so they gave us a warning so we could turn on these lights, and at the time the sun was setting, we had the illumination of the place of work. And just another little detail here. You see I have my head down because I have the reflection of the Earth on the visor of my helmet. So I had my feet down in the payload bay, down, because down is always, when you're in weightlessness, where your feet are. So down was the payload bay, but when I was looking up, I could see the Earth upside down. What an unbelievable experience. Yeah? If you have the opportunity, I recommend it very highly to all of you. Well, I'll say a few words about what inspired me to become an astronaut. And in the French-speaking world, Belgium, France, French part of Switzerland, there's a lot of cartoons of a certain type, Tintin in particular. And there's a famous book of Tintin, On a marché sur la Lune, we walked on the moon, published in 1954. I was 10 years of age. For me, it was a huge inspiration. Look at that beautiful rocket with the white and the red squares that landed on a flat part of the moon, on one of the seas. And Hergé, the author, knew very much about the moon, because you see on the left-hand side a picture of the moon, and you see the flat areas, the seas, and you see the craters and the mountains. And this was, for me, a huge inspiration. I was at about the age of many of you around here. I was 10 years of age. Now, the Apollo program, mentioned already by Naoko, was another huge inspiration. What an achievement, and what an unbelievable view of planet Earth as a little blue and white marble 400,000 kilometers away. Huge inspiration. I was in my 20s. At that time, I was an astrophysicist, you see on the left-hand side, with a small telescope at the Gornergrat Observatory, Switzerland, and High Mountain Observatory. I had a passion for stars and for airplanes also. So I was also a fighter pilot in the Swiss Air Force, you see on the right-hand side, flying the Hawker Hunter as a part-time activity. So I was a pilot, I loved airplanes, and I was an astrophysicist, I loved stars. And I was studying the evolution of stars at the Geneva Observatory, but the data were collected in high mountain observatories in Switzerland and in Chile. Then I was selected in the first group of ESA astronauts, European Space Agency, in 1978. And we were sent to Houston for training on the space shuttle. It was an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, pretty much like there has been agreement between JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, and NASA for flying Japanese astronauts, including Naoko, in the International Space Station, respectively, in the Space Shuttle. Space Shuttle was operated for 30 years, between 1981, the first flight, and 2011, the last flight. And Naoko's flight was about a year, a little more than a year before the last flight of the Space Shuttle. During the last 30 years of utilization of shuttle, it was mainly used for assembling the International Space Station. For me, I didn't go to ISS, didn't go to the International Space Station, but I had this huge privilege of visiting Hubble. Look at that, a telescope in space. Of course, an ideal position for a telescope, because you don't have the atmosphere between the telescope and the object that are being looked at and studied and pictures taken of. And the expectation of the astrophysicist was very high on Hubble, with very, very high resolution pictures. We were expecting about 10 times better, 10 to 20 times better resolution, capability of distinguish very fine details in galaxies or in clusters of stars or other objects. Cooperation between ESA and NASA. Now the telescope was put on orbit in April 1990. You see it was filling the cargo bay of the Space Shuttle, which is in the bottom of the robot arm, which is one of the specialties of Naoko. She operated it on her mission. Just released Hubble, so this is formation flying at 28,000 kilometers an hour between the telescope and the shuttle. 20,000 kilometers an hour doesn't matter. It could have been double or half, doesn't matter, because you don't realize you are going that fast. Only when you look down at the Earth, you see a big portion of the Earth moving rapidly, so you are going fast. But you can close your eyes and you have no idea. You could be just standing still. And that's something very special. You go so fast, but you don't realize you're going so fast, except visually. Now the telescope had a problem. In fact, the main mirror was a little bit too flat, 2 microns error on a 2.4 meter diameter disk. That seems a very small error mechanically, but optically it was unacceptable. So something had to be done, and I was hugely privileged to be part of the crew that was going to go and fix Hubble about 3.5 years after the release to orbit. And these are the 7 crew members. Dick Cavey's on the upper left, the commander of the mission. So they were all Americans, 5 American men, 1 American woman, and myself. And we had on our shoulder the responsibility to go and fix Hubble. Of course, a lot of people had worked on the optical corrector, which was very difficult to design and build, but we had to go and install it. We went liftoff on the 2nd of December 1993 at 4:26 in the morning, I remember it. We had to wake up very early that morning, I can tell you. In fact, we woke up at 10 p.m. the night before to get ready for the mission. We are here close to Hubble. This is the artist's view on the right-hand side of the relative position of the shuttle versus Hubble. I was also the robot arm operator to capture Hubble and install it on a small platform in the back of the payload bay. You see myself operating the robot arm, and Naoko knows that very well. You do the translation of the arm with the left hand and the rotation with the right hand. We train a lot to do that. And we had 5 spacewalks to do these various repair work. And for the most important was the installation of the optical corrector, which is done by 2 of my colleagues here, Tom Akers and Katie Thornton, a big box containing mirrors that were going to be deployed, intercept the light beam after reflection by the primary mirror and the secondary mirror, and do the optical correction to get very sharp images at the focus. And that's 5th out of 5 spacewalks. I love this picture. What a workplace. We are above Australia, 600 kilometers. This is Jeff Hoffman in the payload bay on the right, and in the middle, at the end of the arm, you have a Story Musgrave with all the tools, and you have the telescope at the bottom, 600 kilometers above Australia. And in the background, you see Antarctica and the completely black sky. An unbelievable environment. Unbelievable. A huge wave of memories for me, really. We had total success on this mission, which was not totally expected. It was the first time we're going to be doing major repair work on a complex scientific instrument in the space environment, and we didn't expect a full success, but we had full success. And we gathered here with big smiles, you can see. Through the window, you see Hubble still attached to us with the new solar array that we had installed. And again, it was the beginning of the very, very successful and productive period of time with Hubble, which every week sends us beautiful pictures and very interesting from a scientific point of view. I had the huge privilege of having to go back to Hubble. This was 6 years later in 1999, this time to change gyroscopes which had failed, partly at least out of 6 we had 4 that had failed, and 2 were not enough to allow the telescope to be pointed precisely to celestial targets. We had to change the main computer, 1 camera, and here I'm training as one potential spacewalker on this mission in the water to simulate the weightless condition of space. And on the left-hand side, you have a very high-fidelity model of the telescope. We trained with very, very high-fidelity equipment to reduce the likelihood of surprises. When you go up there and you are in front of the telescope and you have the payload bay and you have the shuttle and you have all of the equipment, and it's exactly like you had in the water and you saw it many, many, many times. You're not surprised, you have trust, you have confidence, you are not stressed. The stress comes from lack of knowledge. If you have good and complete knowledge, you are not stressed, you do your work. And here we are, December 99, so 6 years after the first intervention. And I'm at the end of the robotic arm installing a new fine guidance sensor. You see the size of the telescope. You have my colleague Mike Fall on the left side of the telescope, climbing the north face of Hubble, to join me. We are again over Australia, 600 kilometers. At the end of the spacewalk, you see all the tools on the left-hand side. It's a kind of an open toolbox, and each tool is attached with a safety tether. Also, each astronaut and each piece of equipment, because whatever you don't have attached with a safety tether, you lose. We don't like to lose astronauts. We don't like to lose tools and equipment. So that's an advice for you, especially the young people here. If you go spacewalking, attach your safety tether, because if you don't, you may regret it. We released Hubble after this repair work, this new set of repair work on Christmas Day. And the ground team had put Santa Claus hats on one of the drawers, and they told us, go to drawer M53K. So we went there and we found these Santa Claus hats. So we took this nice picture of the crew. And we released Hubble 25th of December 1999. And again, it was ready to get these absolutely superb results about the universe, pictures of galaxies and stars and star clusters. And here I give you an astronomy course in 13 Hubble pictures and 1 minute with pictures taken with a Hubble Space Telescope, starting with the galaxies at the upper left and going to the right, clusters of galaxies, globular clusters, which are groups of typically about 1 million stars with a spherical symmetry, gas nebulae, out of which stars are born, planetary nebulae, which are the end phases of this life cycle of stars, planets and comets. So all celestial objects, but mainly galaxies, faraway objects, and clusters of galaxies are recorded with Hubble. And that's a great picture. This is so magnificent. This is one of the deep fields of Hubble. Sometimes the telescope is pointed, commanded by a team in Goddard Space Flight Center near Washington. In fact, it's the control center for the Hubble Space Telescope. And they point it to a region of the sky where there's basically nothing. It's all black. But after hours or days of exposure, you see hundreds of stars and galaxies. And in the foreground, you have a few stars of our own galaxy, which are accompanied by crosses because they are point-like objects. All the other objects are galaxies, and there are hundreds of galaxies in this small window. And this is the enormous power of Hubble to record very far-away objects with exposure time that can be typically hours or days. Okay, well, human spaceflight will continue, and Narco talked about that already to a certain degree. And as you know, the next big step is a return to the moon for the Americans, accompanied by agencies, respectively astronauts from Europe, from Japan, from the UAE. The UAE has also signed the Artemis Accord. This program is called Artemis. And the idea is to go to the south pole of the moon, because if you are there, you can be either in the sun or in the shadow. If you are in the region close to the equator, then the day is 2 weeks, and then the night is 2 weeks, and the night of 2 weeks is very, very cold. So if you're at the South Pole, you can go to the rim of the craters, and you can always see the sun, and you can have solar rays, you can always have power. So it's a good idea to go to the South Pole. So for the ones of you, especially the young people here who will go to the moon, you go to the South Pole. And that's going to be your location, and it's going to be wonderful. And we'll go to Mars someday also. And this is a Toyota vehicle, probably on the surface of Mars. Again, it's going to be an international endeavor with, obviously, Japan will be contributing, the UAE, and maybe Switzerland. Switzerland is a small country, but we'll do the best to be part of that endeavor also. Obviously, we need to take care of planet Earth. This is an absolute priority. But space will always be a huge source of inspiration and amazing discoveries. And I feel very privileged to have had the opportunity to take part of this human adventure. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claude, for your presentation, which was extremely inspiring. I was having small tears in my eyes, actually. Thank you very much. I would just like to open the floor. I'm sure you have many questions to ask your astronauts. I was wondering if anybody had any questions you'd like to ask. Okay, I have one. What's the feeling of being 5 seconds before liftoff? Because I would be tetanized.
Wow. It's a good question, 5 seconds. Well, you know, do you have any imagination how many minutes it takes to reach to space for space shuttles, any space rockets? It is only 8 minutes and 30 seconds. It is very quick. Yes. And after the 5 seconds, it is still slow, you know, because of the space rockets are so heavy. And after the liftoff, it gradually, you know, departs from the ground, but it's still slow. So I'm so excited and come on, come on, come on feeling. So, but at the same time, it's very busy because I have to monitor so many, you know, altitude and pressure and all the engines of how they work. So it was very busy, but I'm so excited.
Any other questions from the public? Oh,
Hi, I will speak on behalf of my daughter who asked a question that personally I didn't know how to answer. And when she saw the moon image of Claude, she was asking me, how do they have electricity there? How do they have lights there? So I know it's a very tough question for me. I cannot answer. Maybe one of the astronauts can answer my daughter how to can have electricity on the moon.
The question was, can we have electricity on the moon?
Yeah, because when she saw the image of the moon you had, there was some light and electricity, and she was asking how we can have electricity on the moon.
Ah, okay. Well, you know, when we have sunlight, we can have electricity. This is a so-called photovoltaic effect. You have special cells made of silicon and other materials such that if they're exposed to the sun, then you can make electricity. And we have a lot of solar cells here, including here at the expo, where you can transform light from the sun to electricity. And of course, the moon is very close to the Earth compared to the distance to the sun. So the sun is just as bright seen from the moon than it is from the Earth. And there's a big advantage. There's no atmosphere, so there are no clouds. There are no sandstorm or snowstorms. So you always have sun. But the thing is, the moon makes one full revolution versus the sun in 28 days or in about a month. So again, as I mentioned, if you are in a region of medium latitude or close to the equator, for 2 weeks you're okay because you have sun, and then you are in the shadow for 2 weeks. But being at the South Pole, if you can imagine, you can be on the rim of craters or on mountains so that you will always see the sun will be very low over the horizon, but you have sun, and you can expose your solar cells and you get electricity this way. That's a long explanation, but I think it's complete, and I hope you understand that.
Thank you.
okay, another question from the gentleman.
Hello, hi. Firdaus here. I'm very pleased to hear the presentation today. Thank you for the organizer. And I wouldn't expect to have the chance to be here today. You know, it was like coincidence, you know. But back in 1993, when I was 10 years old, this is first time when I watched about the Hubble, this Hubble Space Telescope repair kind of thing. I think back in 1995. So my question is how, I know this is very mission critical activity. Right after the corrective optic being installed, do you guys test the Hubble telescope first before you release it back to space, or you just leave and let it run by itself? I mean, when you actually ensure the fix are done correctly?
Okay, good question. In fact, all of the repairs we did, for instance, the solar arrays, and we changed also gyroscopes and transmitters of data also. But for the optical correction, we installed the optical corrector, but we could not verify that it was working because there was no way to point the telescope to stars as long as it was attached to us in the payload bay. So that was the only big question we had. We released Hubble. Everything we had done was checked by the ground as being okay, but the only thing we didn't know is the optical correction working or not. And we only got to know that a few weeks later. It was in January 1994. I remember there was a session at Congress where Barbara Mikulski, that's the name of the congresswoman responsible for the NASA program vis-a-vis the Congress. She showed a picture of a Messier 100. It's a galaxy before the correction and after the correction, because they had done measurements and they had realized the optical correction was working. But at the time we released Hubble at the end of the mission, we didn't know that. But a few weeks later, we saw there was a lot of champagne being drunk when we got to know that. That was for us.
I myself have my own telescope. It's not that easy to get this alignment done correctly.
Yeah, but for us, it was a huge improvement. It was nearly a factor 10 in resolution that we got. And for us, it was such a relief, and it's a very happy moment. Thank you for a good question.
Any other questions?
What are like the negative effects being weightless in space on the human body? The negative effects.
Yes, very good question. Of course, the environment in space affects our human bodies. For example, while you're staying in space, we get taller by a couple of inches due to the microgravity, or if we lose some fluids because the fluids shift up at the body, and the brain considers, oh, the amount of water increased, so we release lots of water through the urine. So the water is decreased in our body in space, but most of the changes get recovered after we come back to the Earth due through the process of rehabilitation. But we found out there is not recoverable. It's the eyesight, the pin correction. Somehow, it's about 40% of the long durational staying crew members have an effect on their eyesight, and they lose some, adjustment of the pin. But some are somehow it's still unknown. The mechanism is still unknown. So we are working very hard on that, because if we want to go to the moon and go to Mars, we want to solve those issues. So there is still unknown effects, but we are working on it, and I hope and I believe we will solve these issues as well. So thank you so much.
Okay, I think Ms. Yamasaki needs to leave. So if you have no other questions, well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming today. Thank you very much, Claude Nicolier, Ms. Yamasaki, for joining us. It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming.